The Zone Diet. What is it, and is it an effective method of weight loss? The Zone Diet was created by American biochemist Dr. Barry Sears as a response to a medical history of premature heart attacks within his family. It was populated by his book The Zone, published in 1995. The Zone Diet is a method of dieting which encourages individuals to eat the right combination of carbohydrates, protein and fats to reach what Dr. Sears calls the zone. That is, a point where your insulin levels are not too high or too low. So how do you reach the zone? It is a combination of eating the right foods at the right time and making sure that every meal and snack gets you to the zone by eating low-fat protein, the appropriate type of carbohydrate, and a little dash of good fat. A diet should consist of 40% unprocessed carbohydrates, sourced mainly from fruits and vegetables, 30% low-fat protein sources such as lean meats, egg whites, low-fat dairy products and tofu, and 30% monounsaturated fats such as olive oil, almonds, avocado and fish oil. To follow the Zone Diet, you can use one of three methods: the 1-2-3 method, the Palm Eye method, or the food block method. The 1-2-3 method involves the balancing of the number of grams of fat, protein, and carbohydrates at each meal. Because not all foods are equal calorically, this will allow you to stay roughly within the 40-30-30 guidelines. The Palm Eye method is two-pronged. Because you must eat 5 times a day under this diet, use your hand to count each meal and to determine the size of the portion of protein, which should be the size and width of your palm. Then, use your eyes to visually divide your plate into thirds and fill it with 1/3 protein, 2/3 carbs made from fruit and vegetables, and a small amount of fats. To follow the food block method, divide each meal into food blocks containing 7 grams of protein, 9 grams of carbs, and 1.5 grams of fats. Through the Zone Body Fat Calculator available via Dr. Sears' website, an individual will determine how many food blocks they require in each meal to reach the zone. The ultimate takeaway of this diet is that the balance of protein, carbohydrates and fat at each meal allows you to balance your hormones to reduce your caloric intake without hunger or fatigue for the next 4 to 5 hours after a zone meal. So how does the Zone Diet work? Sears argues that good health is determined by hormonal balances within the body and focuses on using food as a way of achieving this. Each of the macronutrients that make up a zone food block have a different hormonal effect, and by eating these in the right ratio, we maintain a metabolic state where our insulin levels are balanced. So why is Sears so focused on insulin? When we consume carbohydrates, they are broken down into glucose within our body. The hormone insulin informs the body on how to use this glucose and whether it should be burned for energy or stored for future use. If there is too much glucose entering the body via carbohydrates, the insulin hormone signals for the body to store this until your blood sugar levels decrease. The higher the level of glucose entering the body, the more insulin is produced in order to regulate this blood sugar. Therefore, an increased intake of carbohydrates will result in the excess glucose being stored instead of used for energy, and a higher level of insulin, and ultimately, weight gain. An imbalance of insulin may also result in health issues such as low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, or high blood sugar, hyperglycemia, which puts pressure on organs such as your heart, kidneys, and eyes, and may result in increased risk of diseases or issues in these areas. When balancing insulin, it is important to take into account the hormone glucagon, which is stimulated by the intake of protein. Glucagon has an opposite effect to insulin and signals for the body to release the stored glucose into the bloodstream to provide blood sugar to the brain. This is important, as without adequate glucagon, the brain is starved and you experience increased appetite and fatigue. Because insulin and glucagon perform contradictory functions within the body, if the production of one increases, the other will decrease. It is therefore imperative to balance both of these by maintaining an appropriate ratio of carbohydrates to protein within each meal in order to keep an insulin balance. Dr. Sears argues that the ratio of 40-30-30 will regulate a healthy level of insulin to keep the body in the zone, and as a result, the storage and movement of nutrients from carbohydrates will also be regulated. While fats have no direct effect on the balance of insulin within the body, they are responsible for the production of eicosanoids, which are hormones that affect the different hormonal systems within the body and are therefore imperative to maintaining a healthy hormonal balance. By balancing the combination of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats at a ratio of 40-30-30, individuals are able to balance their hormones and therefore can reduce caloric intake without experiencing hunger or fatigue between meals. Ultimately, this calorie deficit results in weight loss. One of Sears's key claims is that the Zone diet reduces inflammation by restricting refined and processed foods. So why is this important? Inflammation within our insulin-sensitive cells, those such as our liver and muscles, which respond to insulin more readily because they absorb glucose, results in an inability for the insulin to communicate with these cells, and therefore an insulin resistance develops. This lack of communication means that the insulin cannot tell the cells to store the glucose, and any excess is converted to fat. In response, the pancreas produces more insulin, which in turn blocks the release of stored fat, and therefore you are unable to lose this excess fat. Hence, reduced inflammation is important for the balance of hormones and therefore weight loss. This inflammation, Sears argues, is caused by excess consumption of processed carbohydrates. This is why eating the right type of carbs is the central focus of the Zone diet. So, is there any merit to the Zone diet as a method of weight loss? Because there are 3 different ways to follow this diet, it is achievable for everyone. If choosing to follow the diet visually through the hand-eye method, the diet is easy to follow when eating out and is less restrictive, and therefore is fairly maintainable for the long term. However, tracking the diet numerically through the Zone block method is more restrictive, and while it may achieve better results faster, is less maintainable. The Zone diet relies on each meal to hit a certain target to stay within the zone of hormonal balance. It therefore does not allow for any cheat meals and requires constant awareness of what you are putting inside your body. The diet does not support the intake of processed carbs, which may result in a lack of fibre within the diet. Other restrictions include glucose-high fruits such as bananas and grapes, which many nutritionists argue provide beneficial nutrients to the diet and should not actually be restricted. Because it is not calorically based, there is no guarantee that an individual will actually be consuming a calorie deficit, and therefore weight loss may not be achieved. The Zone diet controls the hormonal balance of insulin and glucagon to decrease the amount of glucose being converted to fats, but this balance does not result in weight loss in itself. Rather, the diet relies on the loss of hunger between meals and an intended calorie deficit that may not actually be followed. It is important to note that Dr. Sears also encourages the consumption of anti-inflammatory supplements in conjunction with following the diet, which he sells via his website. This insinuates that the diet in itself is not sufficient in reducing inflammation and therefore is not fully effective when being undertaken on its own. Despite this, the diet does promote healthy habits by encouraging the consumption of whole foods, more fruits and vegetables, and less processed sugars, as well as regular exercise. One of the rules after the diet is that you should eat within 1 hour of walking, which promotes movement at least 5 times a day. So is this diet effective? Like any diet that encourages a calorie deficit, the Zone diet will probably result in weight loss. However, there is no evidence that the balancing of carbohydrates, protein, and fats is at the heart of this, and it is probably the result of reduced calories and the consumption of whole, processed foods. The effectiveness of this diet will also be impacted by the restrictive nature and constant need to monitor the food that is being consumed. If a diet is unmaintainable, it may be effective in the short term, but cause individuals to gain the weight back when they are no longer able to follow it. So short term, yes, this diet is effective, but this is probably due to the calorie deficit that is encouraged, and not the hormonal balance that Sears claims is the cause.